Hello there, thank you for clicking on this video. Your time is valuable, so we are super grateful that you are giving our little channel a chance. Any feedback is appreciated. Enjoy the story. The War of the Worlds by hgwells. Chapter 6. The heat ray in the Chopham Road. It is still a matter of wonder how the Martians are able to slay men so swiftly and so silently. Many think that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose, by means of polished parallel mirrors of unknown composition, much as the parabolic mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. But no one has absolute proof of these details. However, it is done. It is certain that a beam of heat is the essence of the matter. Heat and invisible instead of visible light. Whatever is combustible flashes into flame at its touch. Lead runs like water, it softens iron, cracks and melts glass, and when it falls upon water incontinently, that explodes into steam. That night, nearly 40 people lay under the starlight upon the pit, charged, distorted beyond recognition. And all night long, the common from Horsell to Maybury was deserted and brightly ablaze. The news of the massacre probably reached Chopham, Woking, and others saw about the same time. In Woking, the shops had closed when the tragedy happened, and a number of people, shop people, and so forth, attracted by the story they had heard, were all walking over the Horsell Bridge and along the road between the hedges that run out at last upon the common. You may imagine the young people brushed up after the labors of the day and making this novelty as they would make any novelty, the excuse for walking together and enjoying a trivial flirtation. You may figure to yourself the hum of voices along the road in the gloaming. As yet, of course, few people in Woking even knew that the cylinder had opened, though poor Henderson had sent a message on a bicycle to the post office with a special wire to the evening paper. All these folks came out by twos and threes upon the open. They found a little knot of people talking excitedly and peering at the spinning mirror over the sandpit, and the newcomers were no doubt soon infected by the excitement of the occasion. By 8:30, when the deputation was destroyed, there may have been a crowd of 300 people or more at this place, besides those who had left the road to approach the Martians nearer. There were 3 policemen too, one of whom was mounted, doing their best under instruction from Stan to keep the people back and deter them from approaching the cylinder. There was some wooing from those more thoughtless and excitable souls to whom a crowd is always an occasion for noise and horseplay. Stan and Ogilvy, anticipating some possibility of collision, had telegraphed from Horsell to the barracks as soon as the Martians emerged, for the help of company of soldiers to protect this strange creature from violence. After that, they returned to lead that ill-fated advance. The description of their death, it is, as it was seen by the crowd, tallied very closely with my own impressions. The 3 puffs of green smoke, the deep humming note, and the flashes of flame. But the crowd of people had a far narrower escape than mine. Only the fact that the hammock of heathery scent intercepted the lower part of the heat ray saved them. Had the elevation of the parabolic mirror been a few yards higher, none could have lived to tell the tale. They saw the flashes and the men falling, an invisible hand, as it were, lit the bushes as it hurried towards them through the twilight. Then, with the whistling note that rose above the droning of the pit, the beam swung close over their heads, lightening the top of the beech trees that lined the road, and spilled the bricks, smashed the windows, fired the windows frame, and bringing down in crumbling ruin portion of the gable of the house nearest the corner. In the sudden thud, hiss, and glare of the igniting tree, the panic-stricken crowd seemed to have swayed hesitatingly for some moments. Sparks and burning wicks began to fall into the road, and single leaves, like puffs of flames, hats and dresses caught fire. Then came a crying from the common. There were shrieks and shouts, and suddenly a mounted policeman came galloping through the confusion, with his hands clasped over his head, screaming, "They are coming!" A woman shrieked, and incontinently everyone was turning and pushing dolls behind in order to clear their way to walking again. They must have bolted as blinded as a flock of sheep. Where the road grows narrow and black between the high banks of crowd jam, a desperate struggle occurred. All the crowd did not escape. 3 persons at least, 2 men and a little boy, were crushed and trampled there and left to die amid the terror and darkness. Chapter 7. How I Reached Home. For my own part, I remember nothing of my flight except the stress of blundering against trees and stumbling through the heather. All about me gathered in invisible terror of the Martians. That pitiless sword of heat seemed wearingly to on and fro, flourishing overhead before it descended and smoothed me out of life. I came into the road between the crossroads and Horsell, and ran along these to the crossroads. At last I could go no further. I was exhausted with the violence of my emotions and of my flight, and I staggered and fell by the wayside that was near the bridge that crosses the channel by the gaswork. I fell and stayed still. I must have remained there some time. I sat up, struggled, perplexed, strangely perplexed. For a moment, perhaps, I could not clearly understand how I came there. My terror had fallen from me like garment. My head had gone, and my collar had burst away from its fasteners. A few minutes before, there had only been 3 real things before me: the immensity of the night and the space and nature, my own feebleness and anguish, and the near approach of death. Now it was as if something turned over and the point of view altered abruptly. There was no sensible transition from one state of mind to another. I was immediately the self of every day again, a decent, ordinary citizen. The silent common, the impulse of the flight, the starting flames, were as if they had been a dream. I asked myself, had these latter things indeed happened? I could not credit it. I rose and walked unsteadily upon the steep incline of the bridge. My mind was blank wonder. My muscles and nerves seemed drained of their strength. I dare say I staggered drunkenly. A head rose over the arch, and the figure of a workman carrying a basket appeared. Beside him ran a little boy. He passed me, wished me good night. I was minded to speak to him, but did not. I answered his greeting with meaningless mumble and went on over the bridge. Over the Maybury arch a train, billowing tumult of white fire-lit smoke, and a long caterpillar of light windows went flying south, clatter, clap, rap, and it had gone. A dim group of people talked in the gate of one of the houses, in a pretty little row of gables that was called Oriental Terrace. It was all so real and so familiar, and that behind me it was frantic, fantastic, such a thing, I told myself, could not be. Perhaps I am a man of exceptional moods. I do not know how far my experience is common. At times, I suffer from the strangest sense of detachment from myself and the world about me. I seem to watch it all from the outside, from somewhere inconceivably remote, out of time, out of space, out of the distress and the tragedy of it all. This feeling was very strong upon me that night. Here was another side to my dream. But the trouble was the blank incongruity of this serenity and the swift death flying wonder not 2 miles away. There was a noise of business from the gasworks, and the electric lamps were all alight. I stopped at the group of people. "What news from the common?" said I. There were 2 men and a woman at the gate. "Huh?" said one of the men, turning. "What news from the common?" I said. "And yet, just have been there?" asked the man. "You seem fairly silly about the common," said the woman over the gate. "What is all about?" "Haven't you heard of the men from Mars?" said I. "The creatures from Mars?" "Quite enough," said the woman over the gate. "Thanks." And all 3 of them laughed. I felt foolish and angry. I tried and found I could not tell them about what I had seen. They laughed again at my broken sentences. "You will hear more yet," I said, and went on to my home. I startled my wife at the doorway, so haggard was I. I went to the dining room, sat down, drank some wine, and so soon as I could collect myself sufficiently, I told her the things I had seen. The dinner, which was cold one, had already been served and remained neglected on the table while I told my story. "There is one thing," I said, that allayed the fears I had aroused. "They are the most sluggish things I ever saw crawl. They may keep the pit and kill people who come near them, but they cannot get out of it. But the horror of them!" "Don't, dear," said my wife, knitting her brows and putting her hands on mine. "Poor Ogilvy," I said. "To think he may be laying dead there." My wife at least did not find my experience incredible. When I saw how deadly white her face was, I ceased abruptly. "They may come here," she said again and again. I pressed her to take wine and tried to reassure her. "They can scarcely move," I said. I began to comfort her and myself by repeating all that Ogilvy had told me of the impossibility of the Martians establishing themselves on the Earth. In particular, I laid stress on the gravitational difficulty. On the surface of the Earth, the force of gravity is 3 times what it is on the surface of Mars. A Martian, therefore, would weigh 3 times more than on Mars, albeit his muscular strength would be the same. His own body would be co-led to him, therefore. That indeed was the general opinion. Both the Times and the Daily Telegraph were, for instance, insisted on it next morning, and both overlooked, just as I did, 2 obvious modifying influences. The atmosphere of the Earth, we now know, contained far more oxygen, or far less argon, whichever way one liked to put it, than does Mars. The invigorating influence of the excess of oxygen upon the Martians indisputably did much to counterbalance the increased weight of their bodies. And in the second place, we all overlooked the fact that such mechanical intelligence as the Martian possessed was quite able to dispense with muscular exertions at a pinch. But I did not consider these points at the time, and so my reasoning was that against the chances of the invaders. With wine and food, the confidence of my own table, and the necessity of reassuring my wife, I grew by insensible degree courageous and secure. "They have done foolish thing," I said, fingering my wine glass. "They are dangerous because, no doubt, they are mad with terror. Perhaps they expected to find no living things, certainly no intelligent living things." "A shell in the pit," said I. "If the worst come to worst, we'll kill them all." The intense excitement of the events had no doubt left my perceptive powers in the state of erotism. I remember that dinner table with extraordinary vividness even now. My dear wife's sweet, anxious face peering at me from under the pink lamp shade, the white wall with its silver and glass table furniture, for in those days even philosophical winter had many little luxuries. The crimson purple wine in my glass are photographically distant. At the end of it I sat, temporarily not with a cigarette, regretting Ogilvy's rashness and denouncing the short-sighted timidity of the Martians. So some respectable dodo in the Martinus might have lorded it in his nest and discussed the arrival of that shipful of pitiless sailors and want of animal food. We will pick them to death tomorrow, my dear. I did not know it, but that was the last civilized dinner I was to eat for very many strange and terrible days. Chapter 8. Friday Night. The most extraordinary thing to my mind of all the strange and wonderful things that happened upon that Friday was the detailing of the commonplace habits of our social order with the first beginnings of the series of events that was to topple that social order headlong. If on Friday night you had taken a pair of compasses and drawn a circle with a radius of 5 miles around the walking sandpit, I doubt if you would have had one human being outside it, unless it were some relation of Stan or of the 3 or 4 cyclists or London people lying dead on the common, whose emotion or habits were at all affected by the newcomers. Many people had heard of the cylinder, of course, and talked about it in their leisure, but it certainly did not make the sensation that an ultimatum to Germany would have done. In London that night, poor Henderson's telegram describing the gradual unscrewing of the shop was judged to be canard, and his evening paper, after wiring for authentication from him and receiving no reply, the man was killed, decided not to print a special edition. Even within the 5-mile circle, the great majority of people were inert. I have already described the behavior of the men and women to whom I spoke. All over the district, people were dining and supping. Working men were gardening after the labor of the day. Children were being put to bed. Young people were wandering through the lanes of love-making. Students sat over their books. Maybe there was a murmur in the village streets, a novel and dominant topic in the public houses, and here and there a messenger or even an eyewitness of the later occurrence caused a whirl of excitement, a shouting and running to and from. But for the most part, the daily routine of working, eating, drinking, sleeping went as it had done for countless years, as though no planet Mars existed in the sky. Even at Walking Station and Horseway and Chapham that was the case. In Walking Junction, until late hour, trains were stopping and going on, others were shunting on the sidings, passengers were aligned and waiting, and everything was proceeding in the most ordinary way. A boy from town, trenching on Smith's Monopoly, was selling papers with the afternoon's news. The ringing impact of trucks, the sharp whistle of engine from the junction, mingled with their shouting of "Men from Mars." Excited men came to the station about 9 o'clock with incredible tingings and caused no more disturbance than drunkard might have done. People rattling London words, peering into the darkness outside the carriage windows, and saw only a rare, flickering, vanishing spark dance up from the direction of Horseway, red glow and thin veil of smoke driving across the stars, and the thought that nothing more serious than a heat fire was happening. It was only round the edge of the common that any disturbance was perceptible. There were half a dozen villas burning on the walking border. There were lights in all the houses on the common site of the 3 villages, and the people there kept awake till dawn. A curious crowd lingered restlessly, people coming and going, but the crowd remained both on the Chapham and Horsewell Bridge. 1 or 2 adventurous souls, it was afterwards found, went into the darkness and crawled quietly near the Martian, but they never returned. For now and again a light ray, like a beam of warship searchlights, swept the common, and the heat rate was ready to follow. Save for such, that big area of common was silent and desolate, and the charred bodies lay about all night under the stars and all the next day. The noise of hammering from the pit was heard by many people. So you have the state of things on Friday night. In the center, sticking into the skin of our old planet Earth like a poisoned dart, was this cylinder, but the poison was scarcely working yet. Around it was a patch of silent common, smoldering in places, and with a few dark, dimly seen objects laying in contorted attitude here and there. Here and there was a burning bush or tree. Beyond was a fringe of excitement, and further that the fringe, the inflammation, had not crept as yet. In the rest of the world the steam of life was still flower, as it had flowered for immemorial years. The fever of war that would presently clog vein and artery, deaden nerve and destroyed brain had still to develop. All night long the Martians were hammering and steering, sleepless, unfatigable, at work upon the machines they were making ready, and ever and again a puff of greenish-white smoke whirled up to the starlit sky. About 11, a company of soldiers came through Horsewell and deployed along the edge of the common to form a cordon. Later, a second company marched through Chapham to deploy on the north side of the common. Several officers from the Inkman barracks had been on the common earlier in the day, and one, Major Eden, was reported to be missing. The colonel of the regiment came to the Chapham bridge and was busy questioning the crowd at midnight. The military authorities were certainly alive to the seriousness of the business. About 11, the next morning's paper were able to say a squadron of hussars, 2 Maxims, and about 400 men of the Cardigan regime started from Aldershot. A few seconds after midnight, the crowd in the Jersey Road saw a star fall from heaven into the pine woods to the north and west. It had greenish color and caused a silent brightness like summer lightning. This was the second cylinder. This is the end of today's story. I hope that these past minutes helped you relax and ease you into falling asleep. If you are not 100% there yet, let us just do a breathing exercise. Count mentally with me your breath intakes and exhales. Concentrate on the count, nothing more. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Intake 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3,